We get support from Audible. We've all got busy schedules. And I'm sure sometimes you feel like, with all the things you have to do, it's hard to find time for the stuff you love to do, like reading. That's why Audible is so great. Audible offers an incredible selection of audiobooks across every genre, from bestsellers and new releases to celebrity memoirs, mysteries and thrillers, motivation, wellness, business, and more. Plus, as an Audible member, you can choose one title a month to keep from their entire catalog, including the latest bestsellers and new releases. And also, I have to say, I love how the Audible app makes it easy to listen anytime, anywhere. When you're traveling, working out, walking, doing chores, wherever your day takes you. Cleaning the bathroom has really never been more fun. Let Audible help you discover new ways to laugh, be inspired, or be entertained. New members can try it free for 30 days. Visit audible.com/listening or text listening to 500-500. That's audible.com/listening or text listening to 500-500 to try Audible free for 30 days. Audible.com/listening.
My favorite thing about working in healthcare is the people. This industry brings together brilliant, highly motivated individuals who are driven by the opportunity to make a difference. My name is Hallie Tecco, and this is The Heart of Healthcare, a podcast where I'll be introducing you to the people on the ground moving the needle in public health and medicine.
So tell everybody what Shook One means.
Shook One is the title of a classic Mobb Deep record. And, you know, growing up in the hood, that was the last thing you wanted to be. You know, you didn't want to be a shook individual. Shook meant that you were soft, you were scared. You know, you had to be hardcore. And, you know, I like to live my truth so nobody can use my truth against me. So instead of running from the term shook, I'm embracing it.
Born Leonard McKelvey, Charlemagne the God is a multimedia mogul, Radio Hall of Fame inductee, best-selling author, and one of the most influential thought leaders in modern culture. He is the outspoken, well-informed, and charismatic co-host of the popular radio show The Breakfast Club, heard by over 4.5 million listeners every day. Charlemagne also hosts The God's Honest Truth, a late-night show on Comedy Central, co-created with Stephen Colbert, where he takes on social issues and topics permeating politics and culture. Charlemagne is the author of the New York Times best-selling books Black Privilege, Opportunity Comes to Those Who Create It, and Shook One, Anxiety Playing Tricks on Me, which launched him to become one of the world's leading voices in the mental health discussion. With a deeply personal vision to help address the unmet and underserved emotional needs of Black people worldwide, Charlemagne founded the Mental Wealth Alliance. His forward-thinking foundation he created to destigmatize, accelerate, and center state-of-the-art mental health outreach and care across the U.S., while building an unprecedented long-term system of generational support for Black communities. As I always say, most healthcare problems have a root in social justice, and today we'll talk about Charlemagne's work promoting mental health equity for Black Americans. Charlemagne, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
So one of the tenets of your work is to bring mental health conversations to the forefront for Black Americans. What has stopped this from being at the forefront already?
Well, two things: lack of education and survival. Because I think that a lot of us didn't even know that we were dealing with mental health issues, whether it was anxiety, whether it was, you know, depression. You know, I think about the dudes in the hood who, you know, we just thought were crazy. That's what we would label them. And I mean, they might have been dealing with bipolar or, you know, whatever it was. So we didn't know what we were dealing with, number one. And then number two, I think when people did know what they were dealing with, you know, they didn't tell anybody because they didn't want to be perceived as weak. And that's what I meant when I said survival. A lot of this stuff we keep to ourselves, thinking that we're protecting ourselves because we don't want nobody to take advantage of us. We don't want nobody to know our vulnerabilities. We don't want nobody to know our weaknesses. We don't want nobody to know that, you know, we deal with, you know, anxiety. Some people really crippling anxiety that keeps them from just doing, you know, everyday, daily functions. So, yeah, I think lack of education and survival, when you did have the education, is what kept us from eradicating the stigma around mental health a long time ago.
Yeah. And you guys also have shown that Black youth are less likely to seek out or receive specialized services and care that they need. Is there a medical distrust there?
I wonder if we're less likely to seek it out, or we don't even know that it's available. You know, I think a lot of times these resources aren't readily available for Black and brown people. You know, like
Access.
the access isn't there. Like nobody's giving us the information, telling us, you know, where we can go to go get these resources. And you know, then just culturally amongst each other, when it is those of us who are getting access to those resources, we're not sharing them, you know, with each other. Like I always talk about my father, who, you know, didn't tell me until 2018 after he read my second book. My second book is called Shook One: Anxiety Playing Tricks on Me. And I talk about, you know, my anxiety and my depression and going to therapy to try to get right. And my dad literally told me that he went to therapy 2 and 3 times a week. And he was on 10 to 12 different medications throughout his life. And he tried to commit suicide, you know, 30 something years ago. And, you know, the only reason he didn't was because of me and my older sister. And he's been getting a check. Like they just toss a check at him every month. And we used to call that the crazy check. I didn't know my dad was getting one, but I used to know other people who were receiving them. And, you know, it was kind of like a running joke. And I remember asking my mom, you know, like, yo, did you know dad was going through all that? And my mom was like, yo, I thought he was just playing crazy to get a check. But no, he really had issues. That's why he was dealing with substance abuse and everything else. But imagine if I would have, you know, had that information when I was younger. You know, when I started having my own issues, I would have at least known what they were, where they were coming from, and that they were just, I don't want to say normal, but yeah, kind of normal.
Yeah. Did your mom know?
She said, I thought he was playing crazy to get a check.
Wow.
But you know what's so interesting? You know, when I go back and I think about my life and I think about, you know, my father, like you could see it. Like he would say things like the devil's coming to get him in his sleep, and he would sleep with like a knife and a gun next to his bed because he always said the devil was coming to his sleep. It was always somebody was after him. Same thing with my grandma. My grandma, my mom's mom, that was her thing. Like, oh, those people in the woods are coming to get me. Oh, I can't talk on the phone. You know, if I talk on the phone, they can hear me. Like that was her thing, and she was a normal person. It's not like she had, you know, seemed like a paranoid schizophrenic or anything like that, but she just had a really bad anxiety. And, you know, she used to talk about her nerve pills. What do you think nerve pills were? That's literally what they used to call it back in the day. Nerve pills. Pills. I got to take these pills for my nerves. No, those pills are for your anxiety.
Yeah. Well, all these mental health disorders are 20 to 75% inherited. So just understanding the family history can help people identify earlier on some of the things they're facing.
That's right. Because, man, one thing people don't realize about anxiety, and especially, you know, for me, I truly believe that your thoughts become things. I'm one of those people that totally believes in the law of attraction. And I believe that if you think positive thoughts, positive things happen. If you think negative thoughts, negative things happen. So what drives you crazy is when you're sitting around and you're thinking about all these negative things happening and it's out of your control. In your mind just won't stop thinking the worst. Stop thinking the worst. It won't stop thinking the worst. And you're saying to yourself, oh my God, I'm going to attract negativity to me because I can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
That makes your anxiety go through the roof.
Yeah. I live with anxiety, so I know how that is. And I seek therapy, and I have taken medication for it as well. And I think when I first started having anxiety and panic attacks, it took probably 2 years to diagnose what it actually was. I think a lot of us have no idea if is it something GI related, because sometimes it manifests as like just being sick to your stomach or you're throwing up. Is it like a heart condition? I know that you've been pretty open about your mental health struggles and especially about having panic attacks. How long did it take for you to figure out what was really going on?
2010 was the first time I actually got diagnosed by a doctor with having anxiety, because to your point, like, you know, physically, I always had the heart palpitations. Always felt like I was having a heart attack. You could not tell me that I was not going to die of a heart condition when I was younger. And, you know, it didn't help that, you know, heart issues run in my family, right? So at the time, I had an uncle who had a couple of, bypass surgeries. Since then, my dad has had one, and my other uncle had one as well. He recently passed away of a heart attack in the past year. I just used to always feel like I was having a heart attack. And I used to literally go to the doctor get my heart checked. They would always tell me that, my heart was fine. And then in 2010, I had got fired from radio for the fourth time, and I was back living at home with my mom. And my now wife was back living at home with her mom in Moncks Corner, South Carolina. And our daughter at the time was like 1 or 2. And I was collecting unemployment checks. And I remember driving down the highway and just feeling like, this is it. This is the heart attack that's going to take me out. And I remember pulling over to the side of the road, drinking some water because I was, having the heart palpitations and breathing real heavy. And I was like, just let me live through the night, God. I'm going to go to the doctor. Let me live through the night. Let me live through the night. Went to the doctor the next day. Doctor checked my heart, told me to think the same thing they always tell me. You got an athlete's heart. Your heart is fine, whatever. But then they was like, yo, do you suffer from anxiety? Because it sounds like what you're describing to me is a panic attack. It sounds like you had an anxiety attack. And I was like, not that I know of. And they was like, have you had these before? And I'm like, yeah, throughout the course of my life. And then they was like, are you stressed out about anything? And I'm like,
yes.
Hell yeah. So in my mind, I'm just chalking it up to stress, and I'm chalking it up to the moment. And I'm like, all I got to do is get me another job and get back on the radio and everything will be fine. And that's, I got the next gig was the Breakfast Club. But from 2010 to 2015, yeah, I'm making a lot of more money than I've ever made in my life. I've got more success and I guess what you would call a celebrity than I've ever had in my life, but nothing changed. Still having the panic attacks. Probably even worse now. The depression, got a lot worse because I wasn't even living right as a person during that time, right? I was out here wilding. And so it's like, yeah, I finally decided to do something about it in 2016. But to answer your question, 2010 is when I first got diagnosed. But around 2015 is when I realized I had to actually go do something about it.
Yeah. And so you started seeing a therapist.
Absolutely.
So talk about your journey from realizing that you needed that this was anxiety to actually creating that relationship with a therapist that you trust and that has helped.
Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of friends who were already going to therapy, a lot of friends who were in therapy, and they would always talk to me about the benefits of therapy. And growing up, I used to love the show Girlfriends, and on the show Girlfriends, Joan and Tracy Ellis Ross character Joan and Jill Marie Jones character Tony, they both went to therapy. And Frasier was, Kelsey Grammer was the executive producer of Frasier. So, did he used to play the therapist on that? I don't remember. But even with the Frasier show, so I was very familiar with therapy. I just never thought about actually going to do it. And man, I just started going, and it's just something about being able to go in there and vent for an hour. Like, anything that's bothering you, the things that, you wouldn't dare, I guess, talk about, publicly or talk to anyone about because you don't know how petty they are. It'd be those little petty, nagging things that you think are actually small, but they're not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just really helped me tremendously. But you know just as well as I do, you go to therapy for one thing, and you start peeling back those layers, man. And next thing you know, next thing you know, you get into the root of that depression. Yeah. You're getting to the root of that anxiety. You get into the root of that anger. You're getting to the root of that hurt. I started realizing I had real daddy issues. Like real daddy issues. I started realizing that, my father, who I love, but he literally would discipline me for things he never taught me. But, therapy also gave me a lot of grace with my father as well, because I realized he was only doing the best he could with what he had. And then when I found out that he was dealing with his own mental health issues, and I already knew about the substance abuse issues, it gave me a lot of grace with him because he was being the best version of himself that he could offer at the time.
Yeah. One of the things that I think therapists are great at is like connecting the dots and themes in your life and why you react the way you do to something now because of something that happened, in your past childhood. I've had therapists that are just brilliant at doing that. What are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned from a therapist?
That one right there.
Yeah.
You got to do the work to heal your childhood trauma. I'll say my therapist helped me to realize the childhood trauma that I had. But, I got to thank people like my good sister, Debbie Brown, who's like really big in the mindfulness space. She works for Chopra. She always told me that, therapy is great. Therapy gives you an understanding, but you got to really go do some real work to heal. And I mean, that's what I really just been focusing on lately. Really when I mean lately, like, the past year and a half, especially during COVID, because all my issues stem from my childhood. Like literally the way I react to things now, a lot of the imposter syndrome, a lot of the posturing that I did as an adult, it was because of a lot of things that I didn't get when I was a child. I even think about things like peer pressure, right? Peer pressure isn't really peer pressure because I don't think nobody can really pressure you to do anything. I think that it's more so people pleasing. And I've always been a people pleaser. But the reason I wanted to be a people pleaser is because I just wanted to be accepted because I used to get bullied in 6th grade. So I was the kid that was in like the smart classes in elementary school, and I was in the smart classes in 6th grade and 7th grade. But like my cousins who weren't in those classes, who all ended up being like the guys who were in and out of jail and stuff like that, they used to just straight up bully me.
For being smart. That's so sad.
For being smart and hanging out with all the white kids. Because, sadly, there was only like 2 or 3 black kids in the class. So we would all hang together and we'd be with the rest of the class, which is the white kids. And like my dad was a street guy, right? So he, they knew him from the street. Like he was always the fly dresser, was driving the fly car, always had a little club or something that everybody would go to. So it's like, they expected me to be like that at the time, not the kid with the fanny pack and the glasses and, the tight shorts and all that. Like they didn't expect me to be that. And so they used to bully me. And they just got to a point where it was like, yo, man, if I can't beat them, join them. So I just got tired of being bullied. And I realized that people pleasing got me into a lot of trouble. It got me into a lot of trouble as a kid. It got me into a lot of trouble, even in my early 20s. And it wasn't until like I really just, separated and said, man, I'm only going to do, things that make me happy. I'm going to be selfish. Like that's when I really started to have, real success. But then, you also realize too, especially if you're in media, man, when you see people talking about you on social media, or you see people writing magazine articles about you, and they're literally talking about you like you're not a human, like you're a product, a brand, and they're talking about the things they like about you, in your mind, you start people pleasing again because you're like, oh, I'm gonna give them more of that. That's what they like. So, even when I was, shock jock number 1, I guess, right? It's like, it was all an act. And that drove me crazy too, because I never wanted to be a caricature of myself. That's something I used to say. I used to always say, I don't want to be a caricature of myself. And I turned out being a caricature of myself, So it's just like, man, you just realize all of those things in childhood, like that still haunt you as an adult today. All of those things we haven't healed, those wounds we haven't healed that still spring up for us as adults, man. It's really a psychological mind fuck, for a lack of a better term.
We'll be right back after the break.
Has your chronic illness made it difficult to continue working in the traditional way? Want to learn how to find and create flexible remote work that both accommodates your chronic illness and generates an income? Join the Patients Getting Paid membership, a community of chronicpreneurs where people just like you find workshops and trainings, weekly updated condition-specific gigs, twice monthly coaching calls, co-workings, accountability, and the kindest community to support you on your path to make money while working from anywhere and taking good care of yourself. Learn more or join us at patientsgettingpaid.com.
We all struggle with feeling like there's not enough time in the day to be productive personally or professionally. We all struggle to make our time matter. It's time to take control. It's time to start investing in the corporation of you. At Athena, they've helped over 700 ambitious professionals achieve more by connecting them with best-in-class, globally remote executive assistants. Athena executive assistants go beyond basic administration tasks. They help you make time matter through the art of delegation. They believe delegation is the superpower of all highly successful people. And your personal EA will help you get there. Your EA is a one-on-one long-term partner to help you achieve your personal and professional goals. Take back your time. Join the waitlist at athenago.com. That's athenago.com.
People say that you've been helpful to them by sharing your own mental health struggles, but you've been resistant to the term mental health advocate.
Yeah.
But you know that telling your story is helpful.
Yeah, I honestly didn't realize that. I honestly was just doing it so I didn't go crazy. That was my mindset. My mindset was like, yo, if I don't get a handle on my life right now, I'm gonna end up just like my dad. And what I mean by that is my dad was a good man, a good human. He just wasn't a good husband. And he wasn't the most present father. And what I mean by present, I mean like I didn't get like love and like affection as a kid. My dad wasn't hugging me, telling me he loved me. You know, my dad was a disciplinarian, like, you know, punch you in the chest, go out, you know what I mean? That type of person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And plus I just didn't want to ruin my family. Like I saw my dad, you know, ruin his family. Like I was out here wilding. I was out here really living the life of a radio star. You know, I was out here with a bunch of different women and, you know, the drugs and alcohol, all of that, you know, and yeah, I just really felt myself slipping. And I thought about people in this industry who we thought was going crazy. You know, it's always somebody they label as going crazy. And in my mind, I was like, yo, I just did not want that to be me. So when I just started talking about my story, it was because I really had started going to therapy.
Yeah.
And therapy was confusing me because everything I thought I knew, I was realizing I didn't know. And I was learning so many things about myself that, you know, was just new to me. So it's like, yo, think about waking up every day and nobody can tell you nothing. You got everything all figured out. You're always open to learn, but you already think you know what's going to happen anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But then you sit down in therapy and you're unlearning all of this stuff. And you're realizing how much you have just been feeding your ego and not your soul. And you realize how much you've been leading with ego.
Yeah.
And man, I was just in a real vulnerable place where I didn't have anything else I wanted to talk about. And it became a joke almost. It was like, I'm going to therapy at 3:00 and like people could even hear these. You could even hear the ups and downs of me on the radio, like, but I was just trying to explain to people what I was going through. And then it really helped when a lot of guests would come in here and, you know, a lot of them were in therapy too. And it just started becoming these really dope conversations about therapy and mental health. It got to a point where, I didn't even realize how much I was talking about therapy.
Yeah.
I really didn't. And then next thing I know, I'm getting invited to speak on panels. And then what really did it was when my second book came out, which was all, I don't want to say an accident because it was definitely by divine design. But I had no intention of coming out with a second book. My first book came out in 2017. It was like April of 2017. And by the end of 2017, the book was doing so well. And if you go back to the first book, I even talk about, you know, anxiety and my panic attacks. But by the end of the year, my book agent was like, man, you know, Simon & Schuster really wants another book from you. And I was like, I just put out another book. And I was like, I really didn't have anything. I was like, yo, I'm empty.
Yeah.
And I hadn't even told her like, yo, I'm in therapy and I don't even have anything in me right now. I'm pouring it out every week. But I was keeping a journal for all my therapy sessions, like literally keeping a journal. So I was like, yo, man, you know, hey, I got this, you know, and I remember just telling my book agent and she was like, wow, that's interesting. A man talking about therapy and, you know, trying to be better and this and that. And, you know, I just turned over the pages to that. And then she connected me with a doctor named Dr. Ish Major, my man, Dr. Ish, you know, and she was like, yo, let's have a doctor in the book giving these clinical, you know, correlations to the things that, you know, you're talking about. And that's literally how it happened. It wasn't any real plan or any real thought. I literally just had this journal that I was already writing, turned it over, got with Dr. Ish. Answered a few more questions about things, wrote a few more, feelings, and the book came out, and I didn't even want to read it, and I still haven't read it. Right? Well, no, I read it.
Wow.
I read it one time. I read it one time. I read it once.
Okay.
I read it once. I literally read it once, and
Wow.
it was too painful to read.
Yeah. You weren't writing it for anyone else. You wrote it for yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I thought I could just put it out into the world, but I forgot I had to go talk about it. And
Yeah.
it was interesting because I remember Dr. Phil saying to me, "This is one of the most important books of this generation. Like, you don't understand how important this book is." And, he invited me on his show, and that was like, man, I just spilled my guts because, you're sitting on that stage and you're realizing, like, I'm not ready to talk about these things. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not ready to talk about these things publicly, man. Like,
Yeah.
this is like, oh my God. But then I was just like, sink or swim. So I was just telling my story, and, it connected with a lot of people. And to bring it all back home, and I remember being on a panel with Taraji P. Henson and Tracy Jade, and those are two individuals who are so big in this mental health space, and I appreciate their voices so much. And I remember somebody introduced me as a mental health advocate, and I corrected them, like, nah, I'm not a mental health advocate. And
Yeah, I saw that.
Tracy and Taraji was like, no, brother, you are. I think it was Tracy. Tracy was like, no, you are. Whether you want to be or not, you are a mental health advocate. You're telling your story. And that's why I always say the best way to eradicate the stigma is for all of us to tell our stories.
Yep. So all of this led to you founding the Mental Wealth Alliance. Can you tell us a little bit more about that organization?
Oh, man. The Mental Wealth Alliance, for me, it was one of those things where I was, learning about all of these different, organizations that were on the ground already doing the work. And I was donating money to them, and especially Black Men Heal out of Philadelphia. Black Men Heal is an organization that was providing free therapy, for Black men in the Philadelphia area. My man Doug, and I was just like, man, that's so dope what it is that they're doing. And it just got to a point where I was like, man, if I'm going to do this work, I'm going to do this work for real, because I really feel like, this is my life's work. Just being out here having these conversations, man, it gives me a sense of purpose that I really have never felt. And so, I wanted to create this organization that'll provide, free pre-therapy services to more than 10 million Black Americans, over the next 5 years.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I want to do that. I want to help, the amount of licensed therapists and, psychiatrists. I want to increase that from, 3% to at least reflect the population of Black people in America. And, we want to get social emotional learning and mental health literacy in the schools. So I really got to thank, Dr. Alfie. Dr. Alfie is also the founder of the Coma Project, but, she also runs my foundation, the Mental Wealth Alliance. And I'm just blessed to have people like Dr. Alfie Breland Noble, just around me and in my life to really help, amplify this work that I'm doing. Because honestly, I just use my voice to point to them. I use my voice to say, hey, man, you looking for help? This is where you need to go. Like when these rappers and entertainers are hitting me up and asking me for advice, I'm hitting Dr. Alfie. And like, Dr. Alfie, could you talk to such and such? Could you connect such and such with somebody? Because, man, during the pandemic, I've never seen anything like it in my life. If I showed you the amount of rappers and entertainers who were just reaching out to me, text message, phone calls, DMs on Instagram, because they were ready to see somebody, because they were ready to, unpack a lot of their issues. And it was just a blessing that I have this, tribe of people that do this work that I could connect them with. So it just gives me a real sense of purpose.
That's great. So culturally competent is the word that you use to describe what we need in the fields. There's a shortage of culturally competent service providers. What do you mean by that?
People that understand, what it is that a Black person or a woman or, a member of the LGBT community or, anybody that's just, I guess, quote unquote, different, right? Like anybody that's different, especially Black people. I know when I first started therapy, I didn't want a Black therapist on purpose.
Interesting.
I didn't want somebody who might share some of my same biases. Like, I wanted to talk to somebody who could be super objective. So in my mind, and this is going to sound crazy, I was like, I want an Asian woman. I want somebody who doesn't
Okay.
know anything about blackness. I don't want somebody who knows anything about whiteness. I wanted to talk to somebody to make sure that I wasn't tripping. Like, I know how all of us feel about white supremacy. I know how a lot of us feel about, having to get up and navigate these spaces where, it's like whiteness is just really in control in a real way. So I didn't want anybody reinforcing that. I actually wanted to talk to somebody to make sure I wasn't like just bugging. And I definitely didn't want to talk to a white person about that. So like my neutral ground, I felt like, I don't know why, it was an Asian woman. That's why I felt like I would find neutral ground. And I wanted to see, what that person would think. But I mean, if you
Did
think
you find her?
Of course not.
No.
you know how hard it is to find a black therapist? So an Asian woman,
Interesting.
of course I didn't find one, but I ended up with a really, good white woman. And I'm realizing that there's different styles of therapy. So, I think a lot of us, we go and we sit in therapy and we think that, there's going to be somebody talking back to us, giving us advice. Sometimes that person is just there to listen.
No, I wish they would talk. I wish they would tell me the answers. That's the most frustrating thing is,
absolutely.
Well, what should I do? And they don't answer you.
That's right. But what I realized is, and it's actually a technique a good friend of mine who's no longer with us, Jasmine Waters, she used to do. Jazz would let you talk until you figure it out. Yeah. Because that's truly what happens. For every question your mind has, your mind also has the answer to said question. And so it's like you'll talk, and then eventually you be like, oh, shoot, I do know exactly what to do.
Yeah. They're like the Sherpa that guides you to the answer. But,
absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. So it's like, I mean, she was good. She was good. And sometimes it's just, it also was refreshing, especially, around, 2018, 2019, 2020 with George Floyd, when things got really hectic, just to see a white person agreeing with me and understanding where I'm coming from as far as like the injustices that, we face in this country. Cause, it really will have you thinking that you're crazy.
Yeah.
Like it really will. And it's like, y'all don't see this. Like we're the only ones that see this, just us. So it's like when, you got somebody else that sees it too, man, it just, I don't know, it helps.
Yeah. Well, we can't talk about therapy without talking about how expensive it is, up to, $100, $250 an hour. How can we possibly get people who need therapy into therapy when it's so expensive?
Well, that's why we started the Mental Wealth Alliance. That's one of the reasons. I want to raise, my goal is to raise $100 million over the next 5 years. And, I want to get 10 million people into therapy. I want to pay for 10 million people to go to therapy for free. And it's a model that I saw, like I said, Black Men Heal do. And, they started off by getting volunteers. So they had psychiatrists and, licensed therapists volunteering. And then it turned into them raising money and them being able to pay the licensed therapists and the doctors, the psychiatrists. So I can't think of any other way other than that. I honestly think that it's something that should be for free, especially in schools. That's one of the reasons I want to get social and emotional learning in schools and mental health literacy in schools. Because I sit back and think, I'm like, what the hell was the guidance counselor for? What did the guidance counselor do when we were in school?
What guiding? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was no guidance. I literally remember having these issues in school. And of course, you're a kid. So a lot of those issues projecting actions, right? So you start acting out and you start, getting in trouble and being disruptive and things like that. And like, they literally would make us take these standardized tests and then throw us in these trailers in the back. Like it was nobody there talking to me through my issues. It was put them on Ritalin.
Yeah.
It was, let's give them a test. And they'd be asking me, do I hear voices? Like crazy, like silly stuff. Like,
yeah.
And it's like, there was no real, like, okay, this person deals with anxiety. Okay, this kid is chronically depressed.
Yeah.
There was none of that.
Not at all. I mean, research has found that Black children, when they exhibit these certain behaviors that stem from mental health challenges, they're considered deviant and defiant. But when white children do it, they're just expressive or they're exploring their space.
Yeah, that was me. And I'm like that. My dad would not let them put me on Ritalin. And it's so interesting because one of my daughters is that way, and I had to check myself because I found myself sounding a lot like my old school pops because I would use language like, "What's wrong with her?" But there's nothing wrong with her.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? She's actually a genius.
Mm-hmm.
She just needs a little bit more attention than the others. That's all.
Yeah.
That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. She needs to be loved on. You know what I mean? And it's not like we do love on her, but she just, she needs. I always want to be the adult I needed as a child. And I think we're so quick to, like you said, dismiss kids and call them deviant and call them bad and disruptive. And yeah, they might be all of those things, but it's something that's causing that.
Yeah.
So
let's find out and help them be their best.
Help them be their best. Because I already know. And the way she is now, I'm watching it. I'm watching like this artistic genius just blossom.
How old is she?
6.
Oh, wow. She's young. Okay.
Yeah. And even when but she's so intuitive. And it's like, even when you listen to kids, right? When kids tell you that they're bored in school.
Yeah.
She's bored in school because the curriculum ain't enough for her.
Yeah.
She needs things that actually stimulate her. Because I watch her when she's really stimulated by something, when she's really into something. And it's usually something where it has to do with her creating, with her building. So I'm like, okay, well, let me give her more of that.
Yeah. So what are you guys doing in schools? What sort of work is MWA doing?
It's a bill by Bonnie Watson Coleman, HR 1475. And it's the Mental Health Equity Act. And, Ms. Coleman wants to reduce mental health care disparities for youth. And she just wants to pursue equity in the mental health space. And it's another bill that's HR 1803, which is the Mental Health and Suicide, Prevention Act. And the House actually passed the bill in 2020, the HR 1475, but it still has to get through the Senate. So, I mean, that's just,
Yeah. So nationwide change.
Yeah. But that's just something that, we have to be louder about so it can actually, pass through the Senate. I mean, that's one of the things that, Dr. Alfie first, introduced me to. And she was like, yo, there's bills already there on the table. We just have to be loud about them and make noise about them. And, that's one of the things that a lot of us did. I think about when we went to, when we all went to Capitol Hill, when Taraji P. Henson spoke on Capitol Hill, she was speaking for that bill, for the House to pass the HR 1475 bill. So, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that bill got passed, to be honest with you, because a lot of us were making a whole lot of noise about it. But yeah, between that and just like advocating for social emotional learning to be in the schools, for more mental health literacy to be in the schools, I've done things with Ted Ryan. Ted Ryan, wants to introduce yoga in schools throughout the country.
Do you do yoga?
I do meditation. Yeah.
And it helps?
Oh my God. Tim does yoga and meditation, but I started doing meditation in December of 2020 because I never could quite grasp the concept of meditation. I could never get my mind to be quiet. I could never get my mind to be still. But we all went away to Mexico at the end of 2020 because, that's when things started to loosen up a little bit. And we all have been in the house. So like a lot of my family and friends, we all went down to Mexico. And, my good sister, Debbie Brown, she brought in a lot of different healers. And man, for like a whole week, that's all we did. Meditation, yoga, fire ceremonies. We did so many different healing ceremonies. And I remember one of the healers gifted me some beads and showed me how to, count the beads. And she was like, when you count the beads all the way around, and she gave me a mantra to chant. And man, I never felt that before. And so I've been doing it ever since. That was the first time that it actually worked, where I when I came to, I'm looking around like, oh my God, where did I go? And so it's like I'm able to do that.
That's
I'm
awesome.
able to do that now. So I love meditation.
Yeah. I feel like different things work for different people, but if you aren't exposed to those tools, you never get the chance to find out what
Man,
works.
that's what you said about finances is very important, and
Yeah.
it's actually sad, because I did not have any access to those resources when I did not have finance,
Yeah.
none whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, do you think that the criminal justice system has been our answer to a lot of the mental health problems that have gone unrecognized and unsolved?
Yeah, because they take these people away and they throw them under the jail for 40, 50 years, instead of trying to get to the root of what the issue is. I've told this story before, but man, I remember in 2018 when the late great Nipsey Hussle was killed. I remember a friend of mine out in LA sending me that video. I didn't want to see the video. Like, I don't like watching things like that. But I didn't know what it was when she sent it to me. And so I clicked on it, and, it's a surveillance footage video. So you really don't know what you're watching until it happened. And, by that point I was in. So I'm watching and I'm like, I not only did I feel extreme empathy and, personal grief for Nipsey and his family, I felt empathy for the guy who pulled the trigger. And I never had felt that before, ever in life. And I literally said to myself, that guy is in so much pain. And it wasn't just that he shot him. After he shot him, he stood over him and he kicked him. And it was the kick. Even to this day, I can't get that fucking kick out of my mind. It was that kick. That kick is like, yo, that guy is in so much pain. He's projecting so much hurt. He hates himself so much that he could gun that brother Nipsey down and then kick him. You just shot him. You already shot him up. Like, it's over. Like, why would you do that? Like, and man, it was just talking to people and Nip's family, later, just and just feeling that grief and I just remember saying to myself, man, I'm gonna do everything I can to help people heal. People, period. So it's like, yeah. So you take somebody like that who is gonna go to jail for the rest of his life. Yes, you got to deal with the consequences of your actions. I'm not saying he should be free at all. He has to deal with the consequences of his actions. But man, while he's in there, can we get to the root of that pain?
Well, and also, can we acknowledge that it would be cheaper for the government to have given him the mental health services he needed earlier in his life than pay for incarceration?
Absolutely. And I think I've heard...
From an economic standpoint, it makes no sense.
That's right. You got to start early. And I think I've even heard that he did suffer from like bipolar or something like that. I think I even read that somewhere. So it's like, man, the system failed him in a real way, So it's just like, yeah, man, a lot of this stuff we can prevent before it even happens. Like, you see the signs in kids. You see, when a kid is angry when they're young and, that anger, they grow up in the disruption in class, turns to disruption in the street, could turn to violence. And then, they start dealing with drugs, using drugs and alcohol. So it just makes a bad situation worse. That's it.
Well, how can people get involved and support MWA?
Man, go to the mentalwealthalliance.org. Go to the mentalwealthalliance.org and, you can see everything that, we're doing at the Mental Wealth Alliance. We definitely take donations. We take donations for anybody who wants to, donate. And, you may want to help some people in need. Like, we're talking about the lack of services that a lot of these individuals get. It's like, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide resources, for those brothers and sisters that need them, to prevent people from even, ending up in those situations. So yeah, go to the mentalwealthalliance.org, follow us on Instagram, the Mental Wealth Alliance, and just, get involved with what we're doing. Like, a lot of the contact information is on the mentalwealthalliance.org. You can get in touch with Dr. Alfie there, as well as myself. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, Charlamagne, thank you so much for the work that you're doing, for sharing your story, and for being here with us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
This is Hallie Tecco with the Heart of Healthcare podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Have an idea for a future episode? Share it with us at www.heartofhealthcarepodcast.com.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Heart of Healthcare. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, follow us on social, and tell all your friends to listen. The Heart of Healthcare is a product of Offscript Health. We are a healthcare engagement company built for patients and caregivers by patients and caregivers. Our executive producers are Matthew Zachary and Andrew McDowell. Our senior producer is Brianna Seeley. Our intern is Antonella Sterniolo. Our host is Hallie Tecco. It is recorded, mixed, and edited by Brianna Seeley. For advertising and media inquiries, email media@offscript.com. That's media@offscript.com. For more information, visit offscript.com.